In this section, we're going to look at basic service configuration. We're going to learn how to start and stop services. That includes the SSH and Apache service. And we're going to learn how to upload and download files using both these services. You might be wondering, what are SSH and Apache? If you don't know what services are and what servers are, please go back to the Hacking for Beginners course, where we explain what these terms mean. We explain what the web service is and what the web server is, what an FTP server and service are, and what's the difference between all these terms. The SSH stands for Secure Shell. We've seen what a shell is on our terminal. And a secure shell is used to remotely log in into another Linux system. So if you are in a remote location across a network or across the internet and you want to log in to another Linux system, you can use SSH or the secure shell to log in and get a shell prompt as if you are sitting physically on that other Linux system. You can execute commands, you can interact with the system, you can do pretty much anything that you want to do. Apache is a web server. In the Hacking for Beginners course, we saw how we can turn our Windows system into a web server and how we can serve web pages. Apache is the equivalent of the Windows web server, but for Linux. There is a version for Apache for Windows, of course, but it's more commonly used on Linux system. And I'm assuming you know what a web server is by now. If you don't, again, please go back to the Hacking for Beginners course. Now that we know what these services mean and what are they used for, here's your post-exploitation tip for this section. After you compromise a host, there will almost always be a need to upload or download files to and from the compromised host. Remember when in earlier sections we talked about Nessus and Nmap? Maybe you compromise a host that doesn't have these programs. And you want to use the compromised host to scan other networks it might be attached to. So what do? You need to upload these from your Kali machine into the compromised host. You do that using either SSH or, to be more specific, SCP, which is secure copy, or using Apache by turning your Kali into a web server and using the compromised machine to download the files from your Kali. SSH is very useful to log in the remote system without having to re-exploit it. So let's say, for example, you manage to exploit the Linux system and you get your hands on some usernames and passwords. Now you have the credentials to log in if the SSH service is running. So you don't have to re-exploit the system every time. We've seen, for example, how we use Metasploit to get root or to get a shell on some systems. If you have a username and a password and the SSH service is running, you'll be able to log in back to that system whenever you want without having to run Metasploit again and re-exploit the system all over again. Apache, like I said, is used as a web server. So if you don't have a username and a password and you manage to break into the system using Metasploit, for example, from the hacked system's shell, you'll be able to download files from your Kali. We're going to see how that looks like practically. First of all, I'm going to show you how I turn my Kali into a web server. By that I mean, I'm going to activate a web service on my Kali machine, and anybody who's connecting to my Kali will be able to see a website. Now I've opened a web browser on my Kali, and I'm trying to connect using my web browser to localhost. Localhost, if you remember from the networking section, refers to my local machine. If I try to connect, as you can see, nothing happens. If you also remember, localhost was the same IP of 127.0.0.1. Remember the loopback address we talked about earlier? This is it now. So if I'm connecting now to this IP address, that means I'm trying to connect locally to my own Kali machine. And nothing's happening because I don't have anything running at the moment. So let's try and change that. I'm going to start the Apache service using the service command. I say service apache2 and start. Now if I go back to my web browser and refresh the page, I get the default Apache page, which now means that my Kali machine is working as a web server. So anybody who has the IP address of my Kali, if they open their web browser and put that IP address in their web browser, they'll be able to see the web page that I am hosting, that I am serving. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to create a file for anybody to be able to download. My web files on Kali usually are under the directory /var/www/html. Whatever I create in this directory will be publicly available for people to download or access. By the way, this index.html file, this is the web page that you currently see. This is the Debian default page. So I'm going to use the echo command to create a simple file. The echo command only echoes whatever I type at the terminal. It just repeats it back to me. However, I'm going to use a small technique to redirect it into a file. And this is the greater than sign. And I'm going to call the file download me. So now the echo command will take that sentence that I'm typing and will put it in a file called download me. I'm going to be explaining more about redirection in later sections. So now if I go and try to access /download me, you'll see that I am able to access that file. Let me verify this. I'm running a Windows system. And if I take the IP address of my Kali machine, which is 192.168.88.133, and I post it in the browser of the Windows system, I can see that my Apache Debian default page is accessible. And if I type /download me, I'll be able to see the file. So now my Kali is serving web pages for anybody who has the IP address of my Kali machine. Let me show you how you can do that on a Linux system. This is a separate Linux machine, and you can imagine this scenario. I managed to get root on that machine and I want to upload a file to it. And that file could be anything. Let's say, for example, I want to deploy a keylogger. A keylogger is a piece of software that will record all the keystrokes. So whenever, for example, the administrator logs in, I'll be able to see their usernames, the passwords, the email that they're accessing or writing, and so on and so forth. Obviously, in ethical hacking engagements, this isn't something that you would normally do. And if you're going to do that in very, very rare occasions, you definitely must get the permission from your client first. I'm just giving you that example to illustrate the idea a little bit more. So on the Linux machine, I'm going to be using a tool called wget. Wget is a tool that is by default found on most of Linux systems that is used to transfer files over the HTTP, HTTPS, and FTP protocols. If you don't know what HTTP and HTTPS are, please go back to the Web Application Fundamentals course. So I have to specify the protocol that I'm using. In this case, it's HTTP:// and the IP address of my Kali server, 192.168.88.131 /download me. I hit enter, and as you can see, the file got downloaded. So in other words, I managed to upload a file from my Kali to the remote Linux box. And if I cat the file, I can verify its contents.